Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we are going to take a look at this little Spyderco Chaparral. This is actually a replica that I bought off of Temu like 8 months ago, right? And I only paid 25 bucks for it. At the time I thought, well, it looks kind of interesting and cool. It's certainly inexpensive. I didn't have high expectations, so I got it. And when I got it and took it out of the box, I just wasn't happy at all. The action was not very good on it. The finish was not really finished well on it. So I just kind of chalked it up to, well, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose in this game. And this is just going to be a loser. I literally thought about throwing this away, but instead I said, no, you know what? I'm going to put it back in the box and I'll just forget about it. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to seeing if I can maybe work on it a little bit and make it any better. So just, chalked it up to being a dud. Let's pack it away and forget about it for a while. So I finally got this back out a few weeks ago, and I said, you know what? I'm going to work on this little Chaparral, see if I can maybe try to make, something out of this knife. And I got to tell you, I now love this knife for a lot of different reasons. So we're going to look here over the next few minutes at how I turned a dud into a stud in just a few steps. We're also going to talk about fidgety. What makes a knife fidgety? It's a very interesting question. And I think this helps begin to maybe redefine what the term fidgety really means. Before we dive into all that, if you would down below, hit that thumbs up button for you, buddy. That certainly helps me out with the algorithms. It's an easy thing to do, only takes a second. If you're not already subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe. Join our little band of misfits and outcasts in the knife industry. We take a look at some interesting knives, certainly some budget-friendly options, so we'd love to have you along for that. Let's take a quick peek at the box. I always like to look at them, and they have just knocked off these boxes to Kingdom Come at this point in time. This has absolutely no label on it whatsoever, and when you look inside, thought this was kind of funny. The paperwork for this knife is actually for the Squeak Slip It, which is a non-locking, one-hand open clip carry folder called the Slip It. So I don't know if they just if they don't even know what they've got or what they're selling, or maybe they just don't even care. Somebody printed that out and they stuck it in a box. Well, this one has no label. I'll just stick this knife in it and ship it out. So yeehaw for that. I guess that's a good thing that nobody's going to be able to try to pass that off for a real deal Spyderco. Lots of videos out there, in case you don't know, on how to identify, even just looking at things like the coloration of this stripe here, down to other little things all around on these boxes that identify them as fakes. And that's a good thing. I don't want anybody trying to pass this off. I think you'd have a hard time passing this off as a real thing, although maybe not so much anymore. Let's take a quick peek at size comps. It's impossible to know how these knives are sized until you start seeing them up against some of your other favorite knives. Obviously, I have a PM2, OK81 in this case, and the Para 3. This is a small knife, right? This is definitely something I'm going to put into my small category for what I like out of knives, although I've got lots of good reasons. We'll talk about it. Anyhow, you're getting the message here, right? This is not a big knife at all. We'll do a few more just for fun because I like getting my knives out. There is the dirty Hinderer XM18 3.5 inch, as well as the Vosteed Raccoon. You can see much smaller than all of those knife options as well. One more I always like to do, a lot of us will have now the Civivi Vision FG, and certainly we all probably have at least one of these CJRB Pyrites at under 30 bucks. Heck of a good value of a knife. So you're starting to get the picture here. This is a pretty tiny knife, right? Although I'm going to tell you, it fits really well in my hand now, and we're going to talk about that. That's one of the things I want to talk about here. I'm going to bring up the specs down the left-hand side of the screen so you can quickly see what these are all about here. Full open, 6.4 inches, right? Small size knife. Blade's about 2.81 inches. Mine comes in at about that same measurement as well. Green check marks mean it matches. Close, this thing's about a little over 3.5 inches, about 3 5/8, I believe that would be. Blade thickness comes in a little thicker on this one than it does on the real one. So the real one's only 81 thousandths thick. That is super, super thin, like as thin as some of the thinnest knives out there. Mine's only 107 thousandths, and that still makes it a nice, very thin, slicey knife. Handle thickness on the original one is only 0.34 inches. To me, that's probably a little too thin. You're getting down to close to like Narrow's kind of width at that dimension. This one's a little little over 1/2 inch, and that's one of the things that I love about this knife. We'll talk again a little bit about that. Satin finish is typical for this thing, full flat grind. Bird's eye maple. This is a bird's eye maple. I'm not a maple wood expert, but you can see, let's do the old zoom in here. There are like little bird's eye knots basically in this wood here. You can see it there, you can see it there. So I'm pretty sure this is a real deal bird's eye maple, which is pretty cool. The original is in a CTS XHP. Holy cow, that's a mouthful. I have no idea what the steel on this is. I would be happy if this was an 8CR13. I don't know. It hasn't worn out, but I haven't given it a ton of really hard usage yet either. I haven't done any cut testing or anything. Real one comes in at just at 2.5 ounces. This is almost 3 ounces, 2.93. Obviously, this is a backlock knife. That's one of the cool features that we're going to talk about this thing. I paid $25.19. I did pay that money out of my pocket. Temu doesn't send you knives for free, at least not that I know of. They don't send me any. The real one of these things costs $207, so yeehaw for that. All right, let's talk about a little bit of a closer look on this thing. When I bought this, as I mentioned, really rough action on this. You could feel just as you're opening and closing the blade, just something gritty, just like metal on metal scraping inside there, right? The other thing, I'll bring up a little picture on the side here. The knife wasn't even finished well, so the wood scales, the wood handles on here, you can see, look how rough they were in that photo. You know, that's a pretty easy thing to do. A little piece of sandpaper in about 2 minutes and you can sand it down, and you can now see this has done a nice job of sanding in there. You wouldn't know this came unfinished like that from the factory, whatever factory that was. So that was a pretty easy fix. But it was the action on this thing, how rough it was scraping when you opened and closed it. It just wouldn't open and close hardly at all very well. That's what I just said, yeah, I'll put it away. I had gotten a bunch of knives in with that order. I'm like, yeah, I'll deal with that another time, right? So not a big deal there, but what I discovered is that the spring bar, so I'll bring up another photo. I took lots of internal photos here. The spring bar that puts the, creates the pressure, the springiness to that back lock bar, had a lot of just burrs, rough burrs. I guess, it must have been a longer stick of steel that they were cutting these, and they just used some kind of wire cutters and just rough cut the wire. And what ended up being the case was there was just some burrs sticking out the sides of that steel spring bar. Well, that steel spring bar moves when this blade opens and closes, right? It's moving along with the lockback of this knife. So let me get you in close here. You can see as you open the blade, the lockback moves up all the way to its highest point there, and then as it starts to close again, it will drop down in to that locking position. Now it's flush again. So as that lock bar is moving up and down throughout that motion, that spring bar, the burr on that bar was just scraping along the steel, and that's what caused the really rough action. Well, that's a pretty easy fix too once you figure out what it is. A little bit of a diamond file of some sort. Heck, you could even use, if you have diamond bit knife sharpening stones, right? You could sand it off on some of that. I put it on a little Dremel. I have a little spinning diamond cutting edge, and just tap the edge of that spring steel bar on the edge of that diamond coated cutting bit, and it ground it right down very smoothly. And so now I've got a really smooth knife. I mean, from open to close, this thing is really nice. So let's talk about some of the other notable features of this knife. I do love the paperclip style pocket clip that just always has suited me. I know some people just don't like them. They hate them. To me, this is one of the most comfortable pocket clips there are. They've made this also suitably short, as you can see, for this knife, because this is a small knife. It did not need the normal, it would have taken up 3/4 of the knife if you'd have put a regular size clip on here. So I really love that. It is reversible, as you can see, and tension is perfect. It's almost deep carry. It's about as good as it gets. Hardware wise, you've got T8 pivot screws and clip screw. T6 on the body. Those are typical for the normal real knife as well. It does have nice solid lockup. Of course, depends on how good you've got your pivot tight. But there's a good solid lockup in there. No blade play, no pivot lash, no detent lash, but there is no detent, right? A lockback knife has no detent ball. The whole lockup is caused by this spring action. That spring sucks it in. You can see when that blade gets to right there, it is sucking that blade right back in there. Not unlike what you might find on a crossbar lock, but that's a nice stiff. But I'll tell you, that is still very smooth now going in and out throughout that motion. Now I have another lockback knife I'm going to review here soon. It was not the case with, so I had to do a little bit of a different bit of work to that one as well. So all good so far. Real bird's eye maple, like we said. The lock tab area has pretty good chamfering around it, so it's not particularly sharp, although we will talk about that. So I guess let's talk about how, well, let's stick with the physical characteristics. So one of the things that people really look for in a high quality knife, and I'm willing to bet if you get the real one from Spyderco, it's probably going to be finished a little better. You can see right here that that liner, the lock bar, is just raised a little tiny bit off of the liners. Now what you would expect, certainly anybody who's a slip joint fan, they're looking for these lines to just completely disappear, like almost not even be visible, where you've got the spacer bars and then the lock bar up here. So you can see it's not quite the tight tolerances, but y'all, we're talking about a $25 knife here, right? Although the wood is slick otherwise, there's no particular grippiness to it here. I'll tell you what, when you've got it in the hand, you're totally locked in. Because this is a small knife, the entire thing fits in the palm of your hand like that. There is no fear or concern whatsoever of this thing slipping out in any way, shape, or form. The other thing I would mention is there's no internal milling on these liners to relieve any weight relieving efforts, although, you know, like I said, still under 3 ounces for a knife, so weight is not particularly a big issue on this thing. The other thing I would point out, there is no lanyard hole. Again, same thing, probably just due to the sheer size being a smaller knife. No lanyard hole, so my buddy John, who loves his lanyards, would just be SOL on this particular knife. One of the things I would point out is that the lockback does require the tip of your thumb in order to disengage that lock, right? And I say that because I have another lockback we're going to look at as well here, where you can use the heel of your thumb. And that makes it just a little bit faster to get in there. And when you're fidgeting with this knife, you can use the butt of your thumb there, the butt of your thumb, to push that down, drop the blade. Can't really do that on here because this is a little bit angular, and it's just small enough to where your thumb doesn't quite fit all the way down there easily. You can see you can do it, but you will feel the edges of that, particularly the metal liners there is what you're feeling more so than even the wood. So it's a fingertip type lockback. If y'all haven't tried a lockback, this is the thing. I haven't had many lockbacks. You know, I remember in the old Buck 110 days, right? Where the lockback is way back at the back end of the knife and you had to hold it 2 hands in order to do that. And that's great when you're a kid. Fantastic starter knife. I bet all of us probably have had a Buck 110 folder at some point in our lives. Lots of nostalgia. This is not a Buck 110. These things, first of all, I don't know if you've noticed, this is on bearings. Now they're steel bearings, which is fine because it's not designed to be a, you know, fidgety drop shut action, right? There's not ever going to be a drop shut action because it's constantly under spring pressure. But when you take the relief off, you can see that blade drops clean and free every time on those bearings, right? So that becomes a very fidgety kind of knife, right? I would also mention the closing procedure. So a lot of people will flip it around and use the thumb to close it and holding it like this. I'm gonna recommend you do not do that. That's a bad habit to get into, particularly if you like to fidget with your knives. I've already sliced a couple of pinky fingertips just because, especially being a smaller size knife, it's just too easy to have that fingertip hanging just over the edge a little bit when you're trying to do that. Pinch it side to side, drop it to your finger. Of course, it's dropping to the little nub there, and it's so light you don't even feel that on your finger at all. Pinch it on either side, use your finger to close it like that. Now, that being said, this becomes a very fidgety knife. So let's talk for a second about what makes a knife fidgety or not. You know, most times when we talk about fidgety knives, we're talking about button lock type locks, or even, you know, good compression lock that Spyderco makes you can just drop shut. For some reason, in all of our minds, fidgety has come to be associated with drop shut. Well, what is really fidgety? Fidgety means you are paying attention to something else. You're watching a video, you're watching TV. You might even be like, I read a lot of articles online for my work. While I'm reading an article, I'm just looking for something to do to keep my hands busy while my brain is focused on something else. That's what a fidget toy is. It's something you can do without thinking about it. Well, as long as you're doing this the right way, this becomes extremely fidgety. And I'm going to tell you, over the last 2 weeks, I'm picking this knife up, this or my other Lockback up, over all of my other knives in my collection as I'm sitting at my desk. I always have 6 or 7 knives sitting on my desk any given time of all different shapes, sizes, and lock mechanisms. But this one seems to be the one that I keep going to. And just because it's not drop shut or button lock doesn't mean it's not fidgety. I have really certainly missed the bus on this, because this is absolutely fidgety. I can do this all day long. I can do it just as well left-handed as I do it right-handed, and I don't have to think about it. So even if, like, my right hand is using the mouse on my computer, I can sit there with my left hand while I'm scrolling with my right hand and just still sit here and do this all day long. It's just as easy lefty as it is righty. It's fully ambidextrous, right, because of that lock mechanism. So just don't sleep on a good quality Lockback that is on bearings and just drops to that halfway point. This becomes just so much, I don't know, it's just, to me, it's more enjoyable because there's almost a little more work involved to it. There's more steps to it. Now, maybe you don't like that. Maybe you just want the simpler, you know, button, push the button and it closes kind of thing. To me, I like this. But the other thing about these knives are the sound. So let me give you a little sound. When that steel locks in there and when it closes again, that's the open, here's the close. It has a great sound to it. There's nothing that quite sounds like a steel-on-steel lock bar, spring power dropping into place behind the tang of that blade. And even the closing action is solid. There's something very satisfying about both the sound and the action of these things, right? All right, let's keep on going. The blade, this is an interesting kind of a drop point blade, obviously. Let's see, I didn't get this out, but I've got one right here. This is very reminiscent of the blade on the Manix 2, right? This is a small version of a Manix 2 blade. Hopefully you can see, very, very similar. Just a very slight swooping curve instead of the more sharp upward sharp curve there of the Para 2 or Para 3 or PM2. Both those have that big, you know, really tall ramp. This is just a short ramp. And to me, I like that. I think I actually like that a little bit better. It doesn't feel as awkward if my thumb goes a little bit forward of that. It just feels a little bit better. I think that's one of the reasons for the popularity of these. So that's kind of the lineage that this thing has come from. But that also means it's because that center line, that blade is below the center line of the blade, super easy for draw cuts, right? The other thing is this grip here, this kind of forward finger grip right there. That's what I'm doing a lot of all day, opening packages, slicing through boxes or tape. But right here, locked in with that jimping, is fantastically comfortable and just feels incredibly comfortable. And again, because there's such a wide handle here, it really fills the hand perfectly for a small sized knife. You're always going to be choked forward on this knife. This is not a heavy duty user knife, right? This is designed for EDC, easy, lightweight, opening boxes, tearing down boxes, opening packages, opening your mail. You can still do some easy little light work on rope or cable ties or, you know, tie straps, whatever you've got there. This is going to handle most everything, you know, short of a hard work day, quite easily as well. Good jimping, great forward finger choil. The bearings are good. You saw the smooth action on that. Let's talk about the sharpness. So, you know, this is a Temu knife from probably all the same factories that all the other replica knives come from. I have not sharpened this thing. I might have stropped it because I tend to strop my knives. It's actually, I mean, I got to give that at least a 9, maybe a 10 out of a 10 on sharpness. That's a pretty smooth edge on that cut. No burrs whatsoever. I mean, you can slice this thing all day long. Pretty good. Yeehaw for that, right? So it came very sharp out of the box. There's no sharpening choil, which is true to the original as well. Sorry, I got junk on my mat here. Oh, that's just going to bug me. Typical fashion, no sharpening choil, right? So it is what it is. That's what you get with these. But that's how the original comes also. All right, where are we at here? Clip is no issue. Ergonomically, fits great in the hand, multiple positions. The jimping is good and grippy, that fine jimping, but it's deep enough to really grip. That forward choil is just excellent. The thumb spoon is the perfect amount for me. The handle's not really grippy, but because the whole thing fits in your hand, you're just really locked in. I mean, any negatives on this thing, I've already kind of explained to you. Had a rough action. It just wasn't really finished well on the internals, which is often what what you get with these knives. What you can't see is usually what's not finished as well as what you can see. T6 body screws, that's a bit of a hassle, but that's again true to the original. You can't really blame them for that. There's no sharpening choil, but there's no sharpening choil in the original either. Overall, this has been a fantastic project knife for me. There's something about the pride of ownership when you take something that you originally thought was garbage and turn it into something that you literally just can't put down. I sit at my desk with this knife. It's like the perfect size and shape for fidgetiness for me. And so I wear it in. I will tell you, it takes a little breaking in to get used to, but once you've broken it in, this is what you can do with this knife. You can actually reverse flip, and that's a pretty rare thing with a lockback knife. That's how smooth the action on this has become now, is that I can literally open this thing by reverse flipping it. Now, it takes a good stiff reverse flip to do that, but try doing that with any other lockback. There's very few that you can do this with. All right, overall, I think you got the message here, you know, from garbage to stud. Excellent knife, very happy with it. I do carry this actually a fair amount, although I do have a couple of others. I've got some others that I really am carrying a lot. We're going to review that one coming up soon, and that's a lockback also. But I'm going to tell you, if you never owned a really nice and smooth lockback knife and experienced how enjoyable and fidgety it is, that sound, the motion, the smoothness of rolling it out and then snapping it back shut, you really owe it to yourself. You know, I understand that, you know, you may not want to do the kind of work on a knife that I did, although I told you it's pretty simple, like a piece of sanding paper on this little wood cutout, and then I took a bit of a diamond file to the burrs on the little lock bar, spring bar inside there. That's pretty easy stuff that pretty much anybody can do, right? And having now done that, for 31 bucks is what these things cost on OKK. I can't find them on Temu anymore, but OK Knives has these at 31 bucks and a little bit of work. You can end up with a really nice little gentleman's knife that you might also find hard to put down. You know, but if you're not interested in having to ever open it up or do any work on a knife, then this might be one to pass on. Again, it did come, you know, pretty razor sharp right out of the box as well, so that's a bonus also. Let me know what y'all think. If any of y'all had one of these Chaparrals, do you have lockbacks? We haven't even talked about lockbacks on this channel, and I know a bunch of y'all must have some of these lockbacks and must think, you know, like I do, that's actually a pretty enjoyable knife to carry and fidget with. Let me know what y'all think down in the comments. As always, hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already. That certainly helps me out. I appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. Hit that notification bell. I would love to have you join our little band of renegades. Otherwise, I will talk to you guys soon. Y'all have a great day. See you later.